Hello and welcome to the Unlocking Behaviour Change Podcast, the show all about psychology and changing behaviour. My name is Jamie West. I'm a writer, performer and musician, and I'm joined by Professor Emeritus of UCL fame, Robert West.
Hello.
Yes. It sounds to you like I'm quiet, but I'm actually just talking.
Normally.
I'm talking at podcast volume now.
Yes.
Do you know what it was? I listened back to the last one, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited in the first episode of the year. I'm like, and we're doing so much this year. Like, I'm just like really loud. So I was like, oh, I'll bring it down a bit.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, you're still in the last throes of your holiday in Portugal.
I am in the last throes of my time in Portugal. Not exactly a holiday, although, when you go to Portugal, it's hard not to feel in holiday mood. But we're coming back tomorrow. Back to how's the weather? Is it cheered up a bit in London?
Well, in a sense, no. In a very real sense. Yesterday it was my girlfriend's birthday and it was pouring. It was pouring with rain. But do you know what? If we spend all the time complaining about the weather, it'll only please the listeners. So we don't like to do that.
No.
Anyway, so today I thought we would talk about COM-B, which is a kind of framework. It's more than a framework, isn't it? It's actually a model of behavior that you and your colleagues have developed over the years. And we've sort of referenced it on the podcast, but we've not actually done an episode or episodes about it. So I thought we'd delve into this COM-B model because it's something that friends of mine who actually study psychology, they'll come and tell me, oh, wait, is your dad Robert West? Because we're learning about COM-B. And I'll be like, yeah, I've been telling you for a long time that. They'll suddenly have an interest in it. But this is sort of stuff that's taught on the syllabus in various universities.
It's been around now. Susan, Mickey and I came up with it for an article that we wrote back in 2011. Oh, my goodness me. And it was part of a broader framework called the Behaviour Change Wheel, which was a system for helping people to use the evidence base and to collect evidence in a structured way to inform behaviour change interventions. And so COM-B was at the heart of that. And it was developed as an attempt at pulling together the sort of the core features of models of behaviour that we reviewed in a way that then could be used as part of a way of both developing actually and characterising and evaluating interventions to change behaviour. So it's very much focused on this practical job of influencing behaviour. Because, of course, if you were to do a model of human behaviour in its broader sense, there's lots of options for you. It could be a neurophysiological, neuropsychological, it could be sociological, and so on. But what we were trying to do was to really focus on something that would be of practical use. And I think that's probably why it then gained quite a lot of traction and is used so widely, often in government circles, but also in in sort of the private sector where there's a lot of work going on how to influence behaviour and in non-governmental organisations and in the research community and so on. I think that's probably why it's got traction. Also, in many ways, at one level, it's a very simple model. So it's easy for people to get across or people to understand. And it's intuitive. It makes sense because in its most sort of crude form, it's blindingly obvious common sense. It could hardly not be true. But what's useful, I think, about it is that it takes that highly intuitive common sense idea, puts it into a structure that you can then elaborate using evidence and the other kind of theories and models that are around so that you can pull everything together into a single framework or a single model that then will I think, pretty much ensure that you've captured or you've covered all the bases that you would need to cover when developing or evaluating an intervention. Because it's not, as some people originally thought it was, but it definitely isn't. It's not a psychological model. It's not a sociological model. It's not an economic model. It's not an anthropological model. It's intended to be transdisciplinary. And therefore, if you are a psychologist or a sociologist or an economist or an anthropologist, then it ought to be possible, and it has proved possible for people to engage with it from their disciplinary point of view, but also to see how their disciplinary approach links up with other disciplinary approaches. So a lot of psychological models, for example, of behavior, such as the very famous theory of planned behavior, very much focus on what's going on inside someone's head, the thoughts, and sometimes, depending on the version of the model, the feelings and so on that are going on inside someone's head that drive behavior, but then pay not enough attention, I think many people would argue, to the environmental factors. And then other kinds of models will focus very much on the environmental factors and not really give enough attention to what's going on inside someone's head. So what the COM-B model aims to do is to pull all this together and provide a more comprehensive framework that people can use.
So there will be people listening who know all about COM-B and they may have used it themselves, but there will also be people who don't know anything about it at all. This will be the very first time they're even hearing of it. And they'll be, what does that mean? So it's actually COM-B. That's sort of what COM-B stands for. That's how it's spelled. And what is it exactly? What is the COM-B model?
The COM-B model is at its very core is a proposition. And the proposition is the B stands for behavior, the C stands for capability, the O stands for opportunity, and the M stands for motivation. So capability, opportunity, motivation, behavior. And the proposition is that at any moment in time, for any behavior, literally any behavior to occur, three things must be present at that moment. One is that the person who is at the heart of the thing must have the capability to perform the behavior. Very obviously, if they don't have the capability, they can't do it. They must have the opportunity to perform the behavior in terms of what the environment that they're in affords them. They must have the space, the equipment, for example, etc., the time and so on. And they must be, and this is slightly different when it comes to motivation, they must be more motivated to do that behavior than any of the other behaviors that they might have available to them at that time. So the proposition, the first part of the core of the statement is that at any given moment, for a behavior to occur, the person must have the capability and the opportunity to engage in the behavior, and they must be more motivated to do that behavior than any other behavior that they might have available to them.
With each of those components, it's the case, isn't it, that each of them, capability, that's a big world in and of itself. Opportunity, that's a big world. And so is motivation. Each of those have lots going on underneath them that you can explore when you're looking at a behavior that you're trying to influence, or it might be in yourself, it might be in someone else, or it might be in a target group of people. But each of those you can kind of drill down and go, okay, hang on, capability. Now that's a whole, that's a whole, I want to say kettle of fish. Can I say kettle of fish? I can't remember if that's the right
in the old
phrase.
days they did put fish in kettles. I never really
a whole kettle of water. That's the new one.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. So in the model, we make a distinction between what we call psychological capability and physical capability. And so with regard to psychological capability, you can then break that down further into things such as how aware is the person at that moment of the behavior and what it involves. So it's not just about whether they're generally aware of it. Are they aware of it at that moment, for example? Because if they're not, they can't do it, right? Obviously. What that then does, this is just one example of part of psychological capability. What that then does is it immediately, for someone designing an intervention, gets them thinking, okay, let's look at the situations in which these behaviors this behavior that we want someone to do is going to be in. And can we be sure that at that moment, the person will be aware that this is an option for them? And that might be an important target for an intervention. That's an example of psychological capability.
Merely making someone making someone aware that an option exists is actually vital sometimes to them being able to choose that option.
Absolutely. Not only generally aware that an option exists, in the sense that, you've told them about it, 2 days ago, but are they aware at that moment when the behavior becomes appropriate? So, a lot of what we do in behavioral interventions is to remind people about behaviors they're already aware of. So, if you look at adverts, for example, to promote smoking cessation, it's not that people aren't aware that stopping smoking is something you can do. It's just it's not, forefront of mind. And what adverts very often do, and very often all that adverts do when they're trying to get people to do something, is to bring it to mind, bring the option to mind at a time when it would be sort of appropriate and relevant. So they increase what's known as the salience of the behavior. Now, that's an example of psychological capability. Other examples are, for example, how well do they know how to do it? Is it obvious? If they don't know how to do something, they can't do it. What are the sort of skills that are needed to do it? Cognitive skills and so on. Do they have the knowledge and understanding to be able to do it? In some behaviors which require us to exercise self-control, for example, like dealing with diets and weight gain and physical activity and so on, which are important. Do they have the self-regulatory capacity and skills to be able to do it? So all of those are what we call psychological capability. They've also got to have the physical capability. The physical capability is, do they have the strength? Do they have the physical skills to be able to do it? If it's a complex motor task, driving a car or flying an aeroplane or whatever it might be, do they have the motor skills, the coordination needed to do it? Do they have the flexibility that, for example, as you get older, your risk of falls increases. If you're looking at fall prevention, then part of what you might be trying to do here is to build people's physical capability. So that capability has a whole raft of things relating to their the mental capability or psychological capability and their physical capability.
I was just at a workshop recently. It was just like a breathing workshop that my physiotherapist was running. And they were talking about this, about learning how to fall in a way. Some of the people in the group were older. And so it was very relevant to them, a bit less relevant to me at this age. But I was like, oh, when, 30 years time, or 40 years time, I'll remember this. But they were talking about the importance of learning how to fall so that when you fall, you can fall in a way that isn't going to be quite so damaging for you, and then keeping up. Although all that stuff around keeping strength and mobility is as much as you can. Incredibly
important when you're older, and it's very, very important as people, before people get to a stage where they, if they fall, it's going to be a serious issue for them, that they have built and maintained their physical strength and coordination and so on to minimize their risk of falls, as well as you say, should the worst happen and if they fall, they could do it in a way that doesn't then, lead to a fracture or whatever. Now this then takes me very nicely onto opportunity, because opportunity is really about what the environment affords you in relation to a particular behavior. And we divide opportunity up into what we call physical opportunity and social opportunity. Now, thinking about the falls example, one of the things that you might do, for example, to help prevent falls when someone's elderly, is to provide them with handholds and things like that in their environment that they can grab onto and use as they're moving about the house, or should they lose their balance before they actually fall over. That would be an example of the physical opportunity. But other things around physical opportunity are, for example, let's say you've got you want someone to do more physical activity, but what's their environment like? How conducive is their environment to, for example, going out for a walk? If they want to go to the gym, how close is the gym, and so on. So it's about the spaces that are available to do the activity. It's about the equipment. It's about all of those physical things in the environment. And then with the social opportunity, it's around what are the sort of social factors that either become barriers or enablers for a behavior. And the common ones are things like social norms. That's a massive one. What are other people doing? So, and what, not only what are other people doing that you're exposed to, but also what do other people think? Do other people, what's the level of approval generally in your environment for this particular behavior? So social norms are an important part of social opportunity. You've also got cues and reminders out there in the environment. To what extent, if it's a behavior that you need to do quite often, for example, taking medication, to what extent is your environment set up to help remind you? Speaking of which, I must remember to take my statins.
That's what this podcast was all for, really. It was just to give you that opportunity there.
It was. So there's a social opportunity, there's a physical opportunity, social support. What levels of social support are available? Do you have the money to be able to do something? So on the social side, again, we've got a list of things that you can point to, which you can put as, like a checklist to say, are these things in place? And if they're not, is that something we should be paying attention to when it comes to either promoting a particular behavior, or if you're trying to stop a behavior, how can you remove aspects of social or physical opportunity to prevent the behavior?
It does make me think, actually, as we're talking this through, I would like to do a deeper dive on all of these, actually, the capability, the opportunity, and actually, it might be the kind of thing we're able to, for our listeners to actually go down, do a whole episode just on capability, just because there's so much in each of these ones. But we'll think about that one. But okay, so what's next? We've done capability. We've looked at, this is just sort of skating over the surface. I guess this is an introduction to COM-B, really. Motivation is next. Tell us about that.
So the motivation part of it, as I say, it's a bit different, because capability and opportunity are all kind of things that you have. Do you have enough capability? Is there enough in the tank here? And same with opportunity. And if there is, then that's kind of like opening the gate for the behavior, saying, okay, this behavior could occur. But that could be true for lots of behaviors in any given situation. This is where motivation comes in. Motivation's job in animals and humans is to prioritize behaviors. Is to say, given all the things I could be doing, what is the thing that I'm actually going to do? So motivation is about what is the level of motivation relative to other things that you could be doing. And again, when it comes to developing interventions to influence behavior, very often we only think about the behavior that we want to promote, for example, or to stop. But actually, a lot of the time, we should be thinking about the alternative behaviors as well, because it's always a competition. And therefore, however much a person, you might get someone to want to go out and do some exercise at a particular time, or if they want to do something else more than that, it won't happen. So now with motivation, prior to the development of COM-B, as you know, Jamie, I and colleagues had developed a theory specifically about motivation called prime theory. And the idea there was just within the sphere of motivation, a bit like COM-B, but just looking at motivation, to bring together all the very clever theories and models that were out there and put them all into a package that would help users to see where they should be putting their efforts if they're trying to influence behavior. And so just as with capability, we have psychological and physical. With opportunity, we have social and physical opportunity. There's two flavors, if you like, of motivation, what we call reflective and automatic. And the prime theory of motivation breaks these down further, so that your reflective motivation are your plans, the things that you intend to do. And so the prime theory is all about how we, in that sense, we develop our plans and how those plans come to influence our behaviors when the time comes. And there's a very well-known phenomenon in psychology, but frankly, it's blindingly obvious, and it must have been known about for thousands of years, which is the intention-action gap, where we don't do the things we intended to do. And there's all sorts of reasons why that might occur. But prime theory actually specifically looks at those reasons, of which there could be many. But a very important point about plans is that they don't control our behavior directly. They have to be remembered at the relevant moment, and you still have to think it's a good idea. And at that time, they may well be in competition with other more immediate motivations that are being driven by the environment that you're in. An important point about plans is that they can only work through the lower levels of motivation, the more automatic levels of motivation, in order to, and they often come into conflict with it, in order to influence our behavior. And for people developing behavior change interventions, again, this is potentially incredibly important, because what you need to know is that it's not enough to get someone to say, right, I'm going to do this because this is something I should do. This is a plan I'm going to make, whether it's, dieting or physical activity or, environmental something to do with, environmental sustainability, or all the things we're kind of interested in, or taking my medication. Remember what I said about COM-B being in the moment. If in the moment the plan isn't remembered and it's not considered to be a really important thing to do because you planned to do it, you set an intention to do it, and you do the things you intend to do, and it's strong enough, that intention is strong enough to win through in competition with all the other sort of things that you might be doing. So there's the plans. Plans arise from our evaluations, our beliefs about what's good and bad, and the plans and evaluations form part of our reflective motivation, the clever part of our brain that humans have that gives us an edge over other species in terms of our capacity to destroy the planet. But and then you've got the automatic motivation, which is, and you know this very well, Jamie, because we've written books on it. The automatic motivation, which is your desires, your feelings, your urges, your drives, and your instincts and habits, these very low-level things. And an important point that I think is sort of very relevant to the COM-B model is that unlike the physical and and psychological capability and the physical and social opportunity, which are kind of like in parallel with each other. They're both potentially feed into your behavior. With motivation, it is ultimately the automatic motivation that is the immediate driver of your behavior, and your reflective motivation has to work through that in order to be able to influence your behavior. So to put it sort of in a crude way, it doesn't matter what you planned to do or what you thought was a good idea. If when the time comes, you don't want to do it, you don't feel that you want to do it or need to do it, and it doesn't trigger the necessary impulses and so on in competition with what else is going on. So reflective and automatic motivation are not in parallel. They're in series. If you think about it as an electrical circuit, the one has to work through the other. And for developing interventions, what this means is that you really have to pay attention when you're trying to persuade someone or convince someone that something is a good idea. You have to pay attention to the fact that when the time comes to do the behavior, that belief about it being a good idea is enough to generate the feeling of want to do it.
It reminds me of quite a famous Eddie Izzard routine. It's quite brief. I can't really do it, but he says you spend something like, you spend ages putting a fruit bowl together, you get it all in a nice arrangement, and then you think, oh, a Mars bar.
Exactly that.
And it's succinctly that kind of how it works. But anyway, we've reached the end of this sort of introductory episode to COM-B. We will be back next time with more on COM-B. So it just remains me to say thank you very much, Robert, today.
Thank you, Jamie.
And thank you for listening wherever you are. Have a look down in the links in the description. You can see our books, Energize and React. And we very much look forward to joining you next time on the Unlocking Behaviour Change podcast.